Well, I do want to be able to make sure that people can see, like, if we can't get to the link because nobody else can.
I've got it pulled up.
I got it pulled up on my phone.
Just
We are
We got it pulled up. I got it
live
pulled up on my phone.
right now. Hello, everybody.
Hey, folks. So just sit tight for a second. Make sure we're all streaming. Guys, how's it look?
I don't see anything yet.
I don't see anything.
I think it's on
yet
a
either.
bit of a delay.
Yeah, it is. It's going to be on like a couple, right about. So nothing too significant. Okay, we're up F30.
All right, there we go. This is all live, by the way. But we're just seeing ourselves 10
now
10 or 15 seconds in the past.
Okay.
I see. All right, I see.
As you can tell, we're new to this.
Super new.
And we're only 15 minutes late, so,
All right,
it's not too bad.
We're running better than the PCH qualifier event, so I think we're doing pretty fine.
All right.
I'm sure that'll go over well.
Game
I don't
on,
care
field
anymore.
reset.
Cool. Sweet. All right. Go ahead and get started.
Yeah.
Second. All right. Well, we'll go ahead and get started, and we'll see what we get out of this.
Chat says they can see us. So
Okay,
we're
that's good. That's
Yeah.
good to hear. All right. So welcome to the first PCH Pit Reveal Night. Right? Ooh. No.
Yay.
A lot of enthusiasm there.
So much enthusiasm.
Through the roof.
Have any of us won the Spirit Award up here?
1002 has before.
Are you proud?
No, no, that's
All right.
no
So
trash award.
this is an event of many firsts. So this is our first reveal night for the district. So this is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
This is our first live show, which, as you can tell, this is definitely our first live show.
Yeah.
We had a tiny live audience, but that's gone now. So that'll be interesting. But before we really get started, you do have to make a usual disclaimer. So any views or opinions shared on the show are solely that of the individual contributor and do not reflect the views of PCH Pit, any FRC team, First, Georgia First, or any of their affiliates and sponsors. So Anupam, you want to give us an introduction?
Sure. My name is Anupam Goli. I'm a mentor, or I'm the head coach of Team 1746 Otto. Kellen?
I'm Kellen Hill, also a mentor with Team Otto here at Forsyth Central High School.
My name's Kyle Fender. I'm one of the lead strategy mentors for Team 1002 and one of the MCs for Georgia First Robotics.
And my name is Sunny. I'm a former FRC student, former FRC mentor, and currently an FRC enthusiast. So if you haven't seen the show before, the idea behind the show is to serve as an FRC talk show that focuses primarily on the Peachtree District. So we're going to be talking about a variety of topics, and today, especially a variety of robots. So don't be surprised if you see us drop some hot takes. Ultimately, we're hoping to provide some entertaining and engaging discussions. So, you know what? I think other reveal nights will do like an hour of talking before they show other robots. But we're going to get started. And we're not going to save the best robots for last. We're going to go straight to 100 with our first team, okay? So our first team is going to be 2974 Walton Robotics. Now, you all know them from Marietta, Georgia, and they've been a dominant team for years, and they're defending district championships, district champions, my bad. They're the number 2 ranked team in the state right now. So they have a lot to show up to. So here we are looking at their robot. What do you guys see?
Well, it looks like they've got a turret on there. We got the Limelight Vision system on there. That's really helpful. They've got floor pickup, intaking system. They're short.
It's definitely a Walton quality intake. I will give you that. It's a Walton quality intake.
Yeah.
I think they've upped their game.
Yeah, they upped their game. That intake looks completely like it's made of paper mache. Like the main roller looks like it's made of paper mache. Now, I could be wrong, it could be great, but it just looks like paper mache from the get-go.
Yeah, which, for those that have seen Walton for quite a few years, like, we're not trying to throw a ton of shade, but Walton doesn't have the best track record with intakes. But I will say one of the, kind of like a backhanded compliment, one of their worst intakes was in 2016 with Rebound Rumble, and they won the district championship.
That driver, I don't know how he did it, but he use that thing like a wizard.
Maybe it's an inverse relationship. The worse their intakes are, the more powerful their robot in general. So maybe it's just like this robot looks like the intake looks generally put together. So I think that, like I said, the roller looks like paper mache, but it does look pretty well put. You have the mecanum wheel intake, so it's going to funnel it in towards the middle, and you see the indexer towards the back of the robot towards the shooter. So I think generally it'll do the job, and it'll do the job well, but I also think that they're going to iterate during the season as they've done in previous years. So we'll probably see something a lot different going into week. What's their first competition?
Dalton,
I think.
Dalton week 2.
Let's see,
Dalton week 2, that makes sense.
29.74. Their first event is Dalton, week 2, right?
Okay.
But
So
kind of whatever game you're playing, I think it's always a risk to put a mechanism outside of your bumpers because you're going to get some heavy contact, and I think especially this year. But it looks like they used some polycarb for some nice durable material at least. I think mounting points can be interesting, and looks like they got some nice long cylinders on there, but hopefully they can handle some flex when some contact happens.
Yeah.
And now I'm thinking about it, I wonder if this is not the real robot, but the practice robot. I think this is probably closer, so I'm guessing some of the stuff with the intake maybe is going to maybe be different in terms of the material as well as some of the items that we're kind of seeing right there. But I think may not be the final product.
Well,
Maybe I'm wrong.
Walton definitely has a reputation for iterating.
True.
So back in, what's the game with the cubes?
2018
Power Up?
Yeah, 2018 Power Up. I don't even think they could score on the scale at their first couple events. And then somehow they added a second stage to their elevator, which, that's crazy to me. But, so Walton has a good track record with shooting as well.
True.
So even if they come out and struggle at Dalton, which everybody struggles at their first event, I think by the time district championship comes around, they're definitely going to be one of the teams to watch.
And
Biggest curiosity from these pictures, and they made some comments in their submission that something is pending, but there's not yet a climber on the robot, which is a big deal this year.
No. It's made of no seal. It's a very advanced material from DARPA, so obviously we just can't see it. It's invisible, so it's okay.
You can see some bits and pieces. It looks like there's a cylinder tucked down in there with potentially a reel, or that down in some the back corners on the opposite side from the intake. But yeah, curious to see that get on the robot.
I will say, giving a compliment to Walton, one of the biggest things that they're good at is they don't play the district, they play the game, which can have its drawbacks but also has its benefits. So I think coming out the gate, they will probably be a climber for Dalton. I'll be surprised if it's not at Dalton because their second event is going to be Carrollton, which, from my view, if they're trying to make sure that they have the point total that they need to get right into district championships, they're going to come out the gate at Carrollton definitely with a climber.
Mm-hmm.
like one of the things that I observed watching the Israel district events just this past 2 days, climbs won a lot of matches, and they were the defining factor. So I think they've probably noticed that too. So they're probably definitely working on that. And like another strength that Walton has is just the sheer amount of driver practice that they do. Like if you watch even their early events, they just do those like pre-practice pads, even in deep space. Like they just practice a ton and they drive their robot a ton, and that's really useful for like not just practice, but like checking to see if your designs will hold up and all that. So I expect them to like have done all that testing by Dalton.
That's right. Yeah, we'll see if they come swinging out as heavy as they did out of the gates last year, because they got on some notice boards as a top contender last year, very early on for filling up rockets. I'm curious to see how they'll fare at their first event again in Dalton next weekend, not this upcoming
Yeah,
weekend.
exactly.
All right, so on that note, that's Walton Robotics. Next, we're going to move on to Team 6925 Warbot X. So they're the Woodward Academy team from College Park, Georgia. This is their third season, and last year they were the Forsyth finalists. You can see we have the robot here, and they actually have a bit of a video for us, which is not uncommon, but it's good to see that they put in a little bit of effort for their submissions.
Yeah.
So Some early prototypes look pretty interesting. Let's see here.
I like this progression. They show us first driving it. That's key to be able to drive early on. Then they show their intake prototype, now their shooting prototype. You can kind of see the process of how they put their robot together.
And I actually really like that they have an option to do intake with a bumper cutout. Like, a lot of teams that have gone with a drop-down intake don't have a bumper cutout, right?
No.
So that means if your intake gets damaged or you lose pressure in your airlines or anything like that, your intake's not going to work at all, right? Here, they don't have a drop-down intake, but they have that central intake. And I think the intuition is that, if you don't have a wide intake, you're not going to be able to suck in balls that well. But we've seen teams do surprisingly well, right? If you have good drivers and you have decent visibility, and if they come to the close side of the field to pick up balls, then I think they'll be one of those teams that's very unassuming, but they're going to show up.
So one thing that I saw in one of the Israel quarterfinal matches was just the sheer amount of balls that were left. There was like a positive feedback loop going on one of the sides where a team had scored 15 balls, and that's the maximum number you can hold in your alliance station, right? So the Red Alliance kept shooting balls in, forcing that Blue Alliance to drop balls back into the field. So a good solid intake system like theirs that's unassuming would easily just vacuum up all those balls and be able to just really be key in that kind of cycling game.
Yeah. It's also worth mentioning that these guys don't have their first competition until week 3.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, if I have checked the schedule properly, it looks like they're signed up for 3 district events, being weeks 3, 4, and 5. So they got a daunting schedule there.
Yeah.
So that means if they get into district championship, that's
4 straight weekends of robots.
So that should be a lot of fun for those guys.
You should get a trophy just for that if they get
Not just that.
If they show up at the last one.
Because this entire season is honestly it's a test of endurance. That's why even just anything close to district championships in terms of if you're trying to just go 2 weeks stacked on top of each other, then district championships, just in general. Now they're going to those three events, and then possibly the district championships. I commend them.
Well, I mean, to your point of endurance, I think would stop build. You have a lot of teams that are already kind of like gasping for air, right?
Ooh, yeah.
So hopefully Warbotics are going to pace themselves going into that 3, 4, 5 sprint that they have set up. And I look forward to what they can do. One of the functions that might not be so talked about is the feeder function, right? Mm-hmm. So they have a smaller intake. They might not be as effective on the far side of the field. But if they're playing close, they can play defense on robots that are shooting. They can pick up a ball or two, and they obviously have the shooting power to launch across the field. And they're going to have 3 weeks of practice, or however long they took the video. They're going to have a lot of practice.
Yeah.
And as showing from Israel the first week as well, you're seeing that role, if you capitalize on that role where you basically get into the zone of basically rebounding, that's a perfect place to be as a second pick robot, or even honestly, if you're able to do that consistently in the qualification matches, I think that would definitely help in terms of being able to get to an alliance captain spot, honestly.
Yeah. You mentioned the Israel event, and I think one of the things that a lot of people, and you guys mentioned Walton, is that they are practicing their cycles to their driver stations, right? Mm-hmm. And at the Israel event, what happened was that a lot of teams were almost built into that muscle memory, right? Mm-hmm. But there were balls all over the field. So, there'd be 5 balls right in front. They'd be like, nope, we're going back to the human player station, which is good for when the competition heats up. But right now, there's going to be a lot of balls on the field. I think teams are going to be very sort of hard pressed to figure out the fastest way to score.
Agreed.
Yeah.
All right. Any more comments on Warbotics, guys? Nope.
No.
Again, I just liked how the video showed them driving chassis first and then slowly building up from there. I feel like a lot of teams would do well mimicking that approach. Just get driving first, then get your functionality going.
And with that said, again, with them having submitted the video and be driving this early, and that they're not playing until week 3, they got time.
This is definitely going to be a driving game, especially with there being a lot of choke points on this field.
For sure. All right, so that was 69-25 Warbotics. Next up, we have my main man's team, Team 1002, the Circuit Runners.
Go Circuit Runners.
They are from Marietta, Georgia. Last year they had the Chairman's Award at Albany. You can still hear me? Okay. They are a historical powerhouse. A little bit of time shade. Recently, they've been a little bit better at the scrappier robots, right?
Honestly,
but
yeah.
this year, you can see on the screen here, this is looking like a proper high goal shooter. You guys have a drop down intake. This looks fancy.
Looks sick.
We've done a lot, honestly, in building up our knowledge base through our mentors. We have a couple mentors actually from Reset Robotics that came over, and they've definitely helped us in terms of manufacturing, in terms of marketing, business management. So there's been a lot of improvement from those areas, and so with a couple of the improvements that we even brought in from a 1746 alumni. We have Thomas on our mentoring team as well, but we also have former 1002 alumni, Cameron Cousins. We've been able to kind of balance each other out, and that's kind of been what we've been doing over the years. So we've been able to kind of build a all-together great product.
Sorry, Kyle, not to cut you off. So what we're looking at right now is a video of you guys. Ready? Looks like an face shot.
It is a full shot.
So is that going to be y'all's default position?
No.
Is that the money maker, or where's the money maker?
No, we want it to be versatile, so we'll see how it goes across the season, but you'll see a lot of the default shots either from right up there along the wall, probably from the other couple of places. We want to keep it a little tight to it because we're going all out.
And what kind of driver practice have you guys had so far?
So in terms of driver practice, we have been working with our West Coast drive pretty effectively over the past week plus. So it's been pretty great, but honestly, our off season was our primary drive practice time, especially knowing with how this build season was going to go with no bag. We knew that the focus beforehand was going to be helping our drivers get acclimated to driving in general, and then as we go into build season, we knew, not unfortunately, Carrollton's going to be a great event, and we're going to do well at Carrollton. We also knew that we would have time. So what we're doing now is being able to do drive training as well as testing. That's been a little bit of our Achilles heel over the last couple of years, is not having enough time to test. So now we can accurately test, and we can basically hammer down on all these different drive techniques that we're going to need in this game.
So, go ahead.
I was going to say, kind of similar to 6925, you guys are going to have kind of a sprint at the end of the season.
Yeah.
With Carrollton is your first event. That's
Yes.
week 4. Albany, week 5. And then if you make it to state, week 6. So there's another
It's
4,
another
5,
marathon.
and 6.
But we wanted to be able to really show ourselves at Carrollton, because that is going to be the most high-powered event in Peachtree, other than the state championship. So we wanted to come out punching. We wanted to show that we are the real WHS. There's only one WHS, and that's Wheeler, not Walton. But the reality is, Eric Kaufman explains it as Wheeler arrogance, and I'm taking that on. Wheeler arrogance is knowing that we are a real team.
You are that arrogance personified. Is that your?
Oh yeah. No, because that's the thing. I think being able to have a all-together mentor base and really motivated students, we really are. There's a confidence there that hasn't been there in past years. So now we're coming out fist up, ready to fight. So
I'll say a big part of the name of the game for First Robotics is accumulated knowledge. So whenever you can get your hands on somebody that has the experience or develop that experience in-house, I think you're going to see that only start snowballing to, again, get a better and better program as the years go.
no, definitely. And being able to have people like Thomas, being able to have seasoned machinists like Noah Minter, as well as someone well-versed in industrial engineering, like Zach Cloud, working with BMW and other companies, it's really helped us to bring everything together instead of being a jumbled mess.
I do have one quick question. I imagine we want to be moving along here, but do you even lift? I don't see a climber on this robot.
That 2013 called. They want their meme back.
So in terms of climber, it's still being developed. It wasn't on the robot for the photo shoot that we did yesterday, but it is being developed, and that will be on the robot going into. My hope is that it's going to be ready to go by Carrollton. If not, it'll be ready for Albany.
Yeah.
So
Time
I'm going to take this opportunity to throw a little shade because we've had a 5-minute Wheeler ad going on essentially.
I'm okay with it.
I will say this: I'm a little surprised that you guys chose to go as hard as you did, because for the past 2 seasons with like the elevator games, I think you guys have struggled a little bit just competitively. So. Last year, district championships, you guys didn't make it to finals.
Right.
You did make it to quarters at Dalton and then semis at Albany. So I think like conventional wisdom would be to pull back so that you can move forward competitively. This looks good, right? But I think we'll have to see in competition whether it's just lipstick on a pig or if it's an actually competitive machine.
Listen, I completely agree with you. And that's why I think it was important this year that we had a cohesive vision from the get-go. I think there's been a lot from the past couple years of, we're going to try this, as well as even with the knowledge base that they had, these are amazing students, smart, everything else. But in terms of learning how to iterate, learning how to really nail down the fine details so that things work over time. That was where they had to struggle. But this year, we helped us really bring in the fine details so that as we're iterative, we're also getting better, which is mind-blowing.
You made the intentional choice to kind of punt and wait until week 4 to play. So
exactly. No.
Plenty of time.
I completely was probably our best decision. Now, I say that.
I'm a little envious of that decision right now. Gainesville coming up as fast as it is.
But I'm excited this year. I'm excited for our team. I'm excited that we're going to come out punching, and hopefully that includes not just a chairman's banner, but also an actual competition banner. So
All right.
I'm happy.
Well, good luck to you. Not too much luck from the guys to our right.
Listen, we could be on our lines together at Carrollton. It's okay. We're good.
We shall see.
Guys, have some shame.
No, it's okay.
On live stream,
let's cut this deal right now.
We'll see you at Alliance Selection.
There we go.
1746 chooses not 1002.
Oh, that would hurt.
Right. So moving on, right? So that was 1002 the circuit runners. Mm-hmm. Next up, we have 4026 Global Dynamics, right?
Yep.
Now, so we have some pictures and a YouTube video from them. And what we're going to look at is they're from Atlanta, Georgia, right? Over the past couple of seasons, I feel like they've developed almost an interesting new identity, right? So I knew them from like the Jeremy Roberts age.
Yeah.
And those robots were like surprisingly effective, but also kind of subtle. Now these new robots they're technically very sophisticated. Last year they had that like back flipping climber that worked like almost every time. And so I'm really excited to see this offering they have for us this year. But let's see. So there we can see their shooter. They have that one Coulson wheel. Can we go to the next one? All right. There's their full robot. So looks like they went tall, right? Which is good call for a lot of teams. Tall with a Coulson wheel shooter.
They've got a turret on there.
Oh yeah, got a turret too.
It doesn't look very sophisticated, but they've got a lot going on there between like the obviously the shooter wheel, the turret, and the whole lift system.
Mm-hmm.
You can see they have like an over the bumper intake. Let me go back to the CAD real quick.
Yeah.
That's where so talking to some others early on in the season, they're like, "Oh yeah, this shooting game is as easy as it's been since all the way back in 2006, I guess, for as large as the goal was. But at the same time, there's a lot of difficulty. You might be able to make a shooter that hits that 2-point goal fairly easily, but it takes so many pieces to be able to do that well. You have to be able to you have to drive well first off to pick up balls or game pieces. You have to intake, you have to convey or index them. You have to be able to aim well. You have to be able to shoot well. So it takes a lot of puzzle pieces in order to get the shooting game down right. So it looks like they've gone after that for that over the bumper intake. They got a tall robot with a turret on it. So I'm interested in seeing how it plays out.
So Anupam, can we take a look at the video?
Yeah.
So it's a YouTube link.
Yep. Give me 1 second.
All right. Yeah. So one of the concerns might be is that they just have that one Coulson wheel with, it looks like it's being driven by.
They got a bevel gear up there.
Yeah,
system
they do.
for-
They got a bevel gear. They got like a tiny motor, not a ton of motor. So they might struggle.
775 Pro, yeah. It looks like.
Yeah. They might struggle a little bit with shot throughput, right? So just typically, if you want a shot with high throughput, you're going to want a ton of motors, or you're going to want a ton of inertia on that wheel, right? Like a flywheel. So here we don't see much of that yet, right? But they do seem to have a good shot. Not a ton of power behind it, but it has a solid angle, which that's all you really need. And it looks like right there, that's like a trench shot, I'd say.
I think it's a trench shot.
Yeah,
It's almost that length, yep.
Yeah, like right at the edge. And
Seems
there
like
it's
an
like
autonomous
there's like a shot from the structure. So
Yeah.
And my thought is, as I'm looking at this shooter and the way that they kind of assemble it, it's not a hooded shooter. It's just two wheels. So I think with 4026, what we are going to see is a lot more software control. So I'm interested to see their autonomous as they kind of go through this, because that shot initially, when I looked at the actual shooter, I was kind of concerned, but it looks like it can the ball will get generally into the hole, obviously. But I think that they're having to do a lot of control systems engineering to really make sure that shot goes off well, because the way that the shooter is assembled now, there's a lot of ways that shot can go wrong.
You can notice in their CAD that they have like the versaplanetary integrated encoder on one of their shooter wheels. So I imagine they'll get that running up quickly and then try and do like some RPM control on that if they haven't done that already.
yeah, those Versa gearboxes are pretty easy to add encoders to, right? So I can't imagine that'd be too difficult for them to pull off, right?
Yeah.
Let's see, tall. Hopefully they don't. I don't want to jinx them. We have a lot of wood here. Knock on wood. They are tall, but they seem to be a little tall. Like they seem to have a lot of weight up top rather than just a shooter.
That's true.
With that big Coulson wheel up there, yeah.
Yeah. So like, if we had to compare it to 1002, 1002 had 1002 looked a little tall as well, but it seemed like they had a very sort of slim structure that went up.
Yeah.
Seems like 4026 is a bit on the tall side. So when they cross in the middle in the rendezvous zones, those bumps I think those bumps can get you if you're not really prepared for them.
That's where they have some pneumatic tires on there, it looks like, for a six-wheel pneumatic drive. So something teams can play around a little bit with this year is leaving those a little bit under pressurized, and they'll take those bumps a little bit better instead of having them fully pressurized. That whenever you hit something, you're just going to bounce straight up, instead it'll take some of that, absorb some of that impact a little bit. So something to play around with for teams out there.
You do have to be careful with that though, because if you're too squishy, then you may not have as easy of a time turning.
Yeah, turning scrub all day.
Scrub is going to be terrible.
Turning and then shooting this year, you have that ball coming out. If you lean back when you shoot, you like kind of like recoil, like as you shoot, your shots go higher. Okay, so 1102. Sorry, that was 4026 Global Dynamics from Atlanta, right?
Awesome.
Next, we have 1102 Making Magic from Augusta, Georgia.
Augusta.
Right?
They've been here for 2 years. Stop giving them shade.
No, it's not. Listen, it's not shade. We just acknowledge that they were able to get across the line.
I commend them for doing that, because the district experience over regionals has been way better for teams in the state.
They're still going to Gaines. I'm pretty sure they're going to Gainesville. Same week as Palmetto. So
So let's take a look at their robot. So right now, 1102, they did struggle a little bit last year with mechanism drivetrain and defense, but last year they still pulled out an overall number 3 rank in the district, which is nothing to sneeze at.
Sure.
So you see the robot this year, they have that sort of revolver ball like indexing system.
The Spindexer.
Spindexer.
Wheel
My
of
God.
Death, I think, is another term for it. But yeah.
Yeah, so it's
WOD for short. Yes.
W-O, wow.
The Circle of Ball Suck.
Circle.
Choices.
Joyce.
so it's one of those systems that we've seen 1678 use, we've seen 2471 use. So competitive teams are definitely seem to be kind of gravitating to this design, which is good for them, right? That means they don't have to do like a massive pivot later on. I think if we go back to one of their other pictures, yeah, there we can see that little flex wheel at the top. So they have some sort of a climber, but looks like they also have some sort of like balancing mechanism thingamabobber, right?
I wonder if that's for balance or if it's to like help grab the bar, get up there, so they don't have to like drive their. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's like the wheel, the way the direction the wheel rolls.
Well, I think if we look at some of the other pictures, there's like a motor on that wheel.
Yeah.
So like, you know.
Well, so it functions both as the color wheel mechanism. That then when they put it up in the air, I believe, if I'm reading into it correctly, I think there's a separate roller tucked in there that when they're hanging from the
That's what it
bar,
looks like.
they can drive back and forth for them.
It's a
balance.
Skywalker design.
Yeah,
I don't know if I trust that.
A lot.
Yeah, hopefully they
I will
put that thing through the paces as early as they can.
I will say I did not realize that that doubled as a color wheel mechanism, and that's actually really clever.
Very.
Yeah, that's really cool.
But I think I share Kyle's lack of optimism on that. Things like, you know, sturdiness, like will it hold? Like, you know, when robots are hanging and CGs are shifting, you know, is it going to hold up, right?
And maybe this is also a CAD. So I also, you know, my thought is that we're gonna see something completely different. Honestly, they corrected me, and it is Dalton and Carrollton.
Yes.
So I will have fun competing against 1102 at Carrollton. That would be great.
We will as well.
I think everybody is going to be competing.
It'll be a show. Yes.
It'll be a real show. But I do think that involving this robot, I think what 1102 has really done well with is getting ahead of the curve on some of the items. I think this is one of the few times we're going to see Skywalker type design in Peachtree, in the Peachtree district. So they have been historically good at being ahead of the curve. My issue is that going to bite them in the butt this year again? That's my issue, especially with something like a Skywalker design. Obviously, if you hang on, great. But then when you add a moving component, it only takes one mistake before you basically pull yourself out of balance.
Yeah. So the balancing thing doesn't concern me as much because, like, there are ways to make balancing easier on yourself. I am, you know, just going back to the sturdiness thing. If this mechanism starts to fail or if it just starts to warp and starts to damage itself, that's when you get to a point where you just can't climb at all.
Yeah.
And to me, when you're at a level that 1102 is, which we'll talk about in a second, when you're at that level, you can't have an inconsistent climb, right? Mm-hmm. So
and let's be honest, that was a flaw last year as well, and that bit them in the butt.
Yeah.
So
speaking of last year, I have a little bit of a discussion question here. Right? So this is 1102's third year with the district.
Cool.
Right? I would say so far so good, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. DCMP, their first season, ranked number 3 last season, and finalists of DCMP. Are we at a point where we can consider them a solid contender now, or do we still need to see something more from them?
I think I've seen enough. They're when all cylinders are firing, they're in that top level of PCH.
Yeah. It's never been a question about them being solid. They're always a solid contender. The question has always been, can they get out of their own way? That's been the question, because that's what happens. Like you say, all cylinders fired, great. They do awesome. But what happens when something goes wrong? And which has been a lot of the situations in the past. especially with Gainesville and the situation of not getting on, and with their alliance partners not getting to the field on time. And then even in PCH District Championship, where the climb mechanism and everything else wasn't working as need be, and there was a lot of failures on that aspect. So the question isn't, are they a solid contender? It's, can they get out of their own way, and are they looking at the fine details to make sure that there's nothing that can go wrong for them?
Yeah, that's where you have to control as many of those small things as you can, and just hope luck falls in your favor the rest of the time. But yeah, there's so many of those small things to be in control of at any given point. So
Yeah.
I would say they're a powerhouse. Just some things that aren't in their control sometimes don't go their way. Some things that aren't in their control just happen to, those ugly gremlins just show up at the most inopportune of times.
yeah, and that
Agreed.
happens to all of us at some point or another. For
Yeah.
again, name of the game for FRC.
And I mean, you have to think about, like, I'll say two things, right? First thing you have to think about is that when things aren't going their way, let's say over the past 2 seasons, we've like seen them have like little gremlins and stuff. It's not like they've exactly like fallen down too far.
No.
They're still number 3 team, finalists at DCMP, won the year before. So imagine what happens when they have a season where they don't have those gremlins, where like the luck actually goes a little bit their way.
Exactly.
Oh, they're dangerous. They're a monster in that case.
And I think I see 1102 learning, right? Which is very difficult for a lot of teams to do, right? So, for example, last year they had Mechanim wheels, and I think they really struggled, especially against defense in that tight area. And this year looks like they have an 8-wheel drive, right? So, I think for a team that makes that kind of investment in Mechanim and like really believes in it, it's a big deal to move on to a completely different drive system, right? So I do commend them for that. And I would say I generally do agree that they are a consistent contender now.
Agreed.
All right. That was 1102 Making Magic, right? Next, we're moving on to 7451 Avenger Robotics, right? They're from Cumming, Georgia. Last year, they had a all hatches all day robot, and they actually managed to find their way onto a pretty functional alliance at district championships. That was actually rather dangerous if you weren't like really following along.
True.
And they had rookie all-star at Houston championships, right? This year, Anupam, can we see some of their robot?
Yeah, I'm pulling up the CAD here right now.
All right, let's see.
It's gonna take some. So it looks like they've decided to this year have, looks like a low gold robot, so they can pick up and index a few balls, and then they have a climber on there. So it seems like they took the Everybot strategy but did their own rendition of it.
Yeah, and so Everybot logo. We have some videos too.
Yeah, we do.
Let's take a look.
Let's take a look
So
real quick.
one thing I noticed, and we'll see
Yes.
in the videos.
Yes.
Well, here's the color. Sorry.
I was gonna say first one of those to be shown off is something.
Why'd you stop?
You can see like just from the shot though, like the intake has a vector intake here. On this board down.
I'm gonna film for a second.
And they have the color sensor up there. So that's good. All right, so I'm gonna get into some action shots here. One thing that I noticed that I think is gonna be something they're gonna work on is that their entire system, their intake and their belt and their shooter outer thing, I think it's on one powertrain.
I was actually just talking to Curtis, one of their mentors / teachers, earlier today, because we were over at the Alliance Field for some drive practice. But while they were driving around, he was explaining that they actually have their intake on one motor and the conveyor on another. They're currently working through some kinks in order to fully separate those two, so there's not a flow difference. But like a lot of teams this year, getting that indexing nailed down so you can properly hold 5 balls without jamming is going to be a big deal. So.
Especially in the corners, as you noticed in their video, they had to spit it out a couple times before, they got right on it in the middle, and then they were able to take it. But even then, they still having some issues. But I think we talked about it before in the discussion, but looking at Israel in week 1, this is one of those robots, and they've done really well. They did really well last year, and I think they're going to do really well this year, where they're going to be in the right place at the right time. And so, as we're dealing with a lot of robots, especially as we're talking about playing the district, they're going to be able to rebound a lot of these balls, dump them into the low goal, and they're going to be a great asset as I would say they're probably going to be either a captain or they're going to be one of those second picks that if you get them, it's going to be a wrap for the Alliance.
Yeah, and one of the things to keep in mind is that they're actually not competing this weekend. They are competing in Dalton for their first events, and they actually have one of the smarter schedules we've seen. So they have a Dalton, they have a 1 week break. And, well, they're not doing 3 back-to-back and then just,
That's
so
okay.
They have Dalton, then a week break, and then Carrollton, and that's their event. Did we see the video of them like shooting out the 4 balls real quick, or was that towards the end?
I think that was towards
the end.
Okay. Well, you guys can watch that. Rewind and watch that clip. One thing that I think they have done absolutely right is that when they do have a robot full of power cells, I think they can unload them very, very quickly, which you would think would be very common this year, but I'm seeing that throughput is not a top priority for a lot of teams. And so it's really encouraging to see them be able to unload, a full rack of 5 power cells, I think in under a second. So they'll definitely be an asset, maybe a first pick on a late seed at Dalton. And then I think they're definitely going to be one of those teams that higher seeds are looking out for at Carrollton.
So almost the bigger skill in that bag of tricks winds up being in that video. They showed off a functional climber, which I think in the videos pictures we've been looking at, that's the first functional climber we've seen, which is again a big deal, especially early on. That's going to put you in a real competitive position in these PCH events.
I would agree with you on that one.
Like we said earlier in Israel, climbs were making a difference.
Yeah. So to sort of back up Anupam's point, at Israel, when you looked at all the elimination winners, right, climbing, so like the end game in general, was about 37% of the total score, right? And autonomous was about 36% of the total score. Right? What was interesting on top of that was that the bottom port in eliminations had 0 scores. Now, I'm not 100% sure what to make of that with respect to 7451, right? So maybe 7451 plays that pure offensive role. That if an alliance chooses to go triple offense, then they're going to help fill that low area. But another thing is if they have that ability to offload 5 very quickly, they could play that feeder role, right? Bring balls into the rendezvous point, dump them, and then just circle back and forth.
That's what I see them like. With the color wheel mechanism and with the climb, I see them, if they have the right alliance, they can just rocket to that number 1 or number 2 seed, pick up a really good shooter, and just feed that really good shooter.
Honestly.
So that the shooter can just stay close to the goal. Avenger Robotics comes in, just dumps 5 balls for them to pick up and keep those cycles going, but with a much shorter time.
Which is very comparable to their role last year as a hatch bot only, is that they wind up being a facilitator for their alliance. That as hatches opened up scoring opportunities for cargo, they could play a somewhat similar role this year if they pursue that route.
Yeah. All right. So from this, we're going to move on to our hometown team. We're going to move on to Team 1746 Otto, right? They're from Cumming, Georgia. They were ranked number 4 last season. They were subdivision finalists. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Back in my day, we just had like divisions, and that was good enough. We were in Atlanta, and they have a long tradition of performance. That's something that's very important for when you keep 1746 in mind. I don't think it's just about the banner count, right?
No.
Because there are a lot of teams that have a lot of banners, but I think 1746 is always in the fight at the end, especially at Gainesville for some reason.
We find a way, yes.
Yeah.
Find a freaking
Even
way,
if we're
man.
not moving at the beginning of the event, we find a way.
So without further ado,
Yes, there's no sound with this video, but you get to see.
version.
I think the logo render was like that, like longer than the whole videos.
Too much.
But yeah, luckily we've had our practice robot up and running for about a week now. So these would be shots from our practice robot. So we're getting some sweet spots figured out for where we want to shoot from.
Kyle, how do you feel about Carrollton?
Okay, listen, we've already shook on it. We're good. We're good. We already shook on it. But no, I mean, we kind of expected this when we signed up for something like Carrollton. So, I mean, this is what we expect from Otto. We expect out of the gate they're going to come ready to step on people's throats. So, I mean, this is just par for the course.
Well, out of the gate hasn't really been Otto's strong point, if I'm being honest. So this robot looks. So hang on. Here's a real question. This robot looks pretty decent. Not gonna lie. Did you guys just build one robot, or is there a competition robot?
There is a competition robot. It has yet to move under its own power. But
There
if
we
I
go.
got my eyes on my watch, we still have a couple of days.
Yeah.
That's the 1746 we all know.
Yeah.
No, we always-
And you guys are going to week 1, and then Carrollton, which is week 4, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So So it's like a little early still. Are you guys planning on rebuilding the whole thing between Carrollton and?
You know,
Gainesville?
I've been with this team. I've been with this team since 2013. So this is my 8th year or something like that with the team. But I think this is the most right we've gotten it this early in the season. Obviously, we've been known for some major rebuilds through the years for hitting state champs with a robot that looks entirely different from the robot we fielded early on. But I'm really happy with a lot of the pieces we've put together. We got some fine tuning, some tweaking to do, just to maximize the output of those systems. But again, I'm thrilled with what we have. We have some climbers that are looking entirely functional, which I'm thrilled about.
Entirely functional.
Exactly.
It's the earliest we've had a climb.
Yeah, for all the climbing games that have happened over the years, we've rarely come out of the gates with that as a skill in our skill set. So I'm happy with as big of a deal as it's going to be this year to be able to have that as a working part of the robot this early on.
Yeah. All right. So we're running a little low on time, so we're going to go ahead and move on. I feel like we can spend another 10, 15 minutes on 1746.
Probably.
I have a little surprise for you guys.
You have a surprise.
I have a surprise.
I like surprises.
Which Anupam may or may not like because he's got to pull up the picture.
I'm okay with that.
Would you guys want to take a look at 1771?
Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
Let's do it.
They're not
I'm
on the
all in.
roster. But Anupam, if you go into Google Drive, you'll see their folders now popped up.
Okay.
Surprise.
Give me 1 second to get the surprise.
So 1771 is from somewhere in Georgia. What's their city? Sewanee, Georgia? Sorry, I don't know their city, okay? 1771 is from Sewanee, Georgia. Last year they were ranked something. You know, Chris,
I don't know where they were ranked, but they were dangerous. They were.
Yeah.
I blame Chris Wilson for this because he messaged me in the middle of the show. And he's like, hey, you want to talk about this?
Chris Wilson.
We're doing it live.
I respect Chris Wilson.
We'll do it live.
We'll do it live.
Okay, so 1771 ranked 6, always super deadly, right? Like I have no idea if this robot's gonna work. I just don't ever want to be defended by it.
Exactly. I don't want to be
No.
on. I don't want to be on the opposite side of the field. I did get a message from 148 last year because they were on the same division as a bunch of Georgia teams, and I remember doing the scouting report for them. I was like, "These are the teams you want to watch out with. If and when, or you play with or against 1771, whatever you do, you don't want to be on the opposite side of the field from them." And this was before champs started, and as fate has it, they wound up playing against them in division semifinals and playing some of the roughest best defense of the year. Unfortunately, they had a little frame perimeter issue that wound up downing them. But again, just the driving was some of the best I've seen. So looking forward to another quality 1771 robot.
Taking me a second, but here we go.
Oh, God.
Let's see it.
All right, there we go. So
That is
I'm gonna try and parse through what we're looking at, right? So we have this really interesting looking intake. Looks like it's like almost like a wall that drops down.
Yeah.
And so that wall pulls power cells in, up, and then into the top of that hopper.
Right.
Can't see much about the hopper, but it's a bit of a funnel.
Yeah.
Then it goes into their shooter. And then we have that little climbing mechanism thingamabobber.
They have a Skywalker.
Have Skywalker.
Yeah, it looks
That's
like they
a
have an
Skywalker.
extra versaplanetary up there. I'm curious where that connects to that would allow them to kind of scoot sideways. But
Listen, I don't question Chris Wilson. I just expect it to work.
I honestly,
Not their
I
first
honestly,
event, but
I honestly
At
don't
least
expect it
later
to
on.
work. I just still don't want to be defended by them.
Listen, I agree with you.
You better hope that thing works, because if it doesn't, they're coming on defense.
Yeah.
Oh
That's
God.
actually scary.
I imagine they have 6
Oh,
brushless
God.
motors on that drivetrain, so it's
Oh.
Right? So
watch out.
and so it looks like they also went low. I have to assume they went low, or else they wouldn't go do so much effort with that climber. To
Yeah,
get
I
it
imagine
down.
so. Yeah.
Yeah, it looks like it just
like
pivots
it.
down nicely. So.
And 1771 does have a pretty storied history when it comes to shooters. You know, I'm thinking, so back in 2008 with Lunacy was the first year I sort of experienced their shooter might, and they were like first seed on their division of worlds, and I think they went all the way to finals or something. And then in Stronghold, they had the catapult, right?
Right.
Wait, was that them? No, that was 2415.
No, it's 2415.
Whatever. I'm sure they did fine in Stronghold, but I think recently 1771, I think they have gone for a little bit of the simpler strategy, right? They're not going to come out and blow you away with this offensive prowess, right? But they do complement with other robots, right? So they build a good alliance, and man, they play hard. Like, I have to say, I think they're the hardest hitting team in the district
league.
by.
In the league.
I don't know. I think like 2337 might disagree with that. 2337 is like, yes, we like took this defensive bot and we added some offense to it.
Yeah, whatever robot they put out on the field, they know how to use it to the best of its ability. So last year they were really good with cargo, but at the flip of a switch, they would go play some of the best defense ever I've seen. So it's,
Yeah.
Luis. Very good.
So-
very good driving. Very good.
I've heard. I think he graduated though, so we'll see if they've done some driver training over there for the next generation.
I'm sure they have, right? And I don't know if I want this robot on defense or offense. I just want it away from me.
Wherever it is, I don't want to play against.
I agree with you.
All right, so that was Surprise 1771 from North Gwinnett from Sewanee, Georgia.
I
Right?
love surprises.
What's their team name nowadays?
It's North
Is
Gwinnett.
it NGR?
Yeah, it's NGR.
North Gwinnett
Oh, okay.
Robotics.
North Gwinnett Robotics. That's
Yeah.
that's
They
that's
go
better.
Through, they go through like a rebranding every few years or something,
Yeah,
right?
that's okay. But that just means I never remember. What
They were named the Phoenixes at one point, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
but
When they
I
came
guess
back from the dead.
and then I don't know what happened, but
All right, moving on. So our next team and our last team is 4188 Columbus Space Program from Columbus, Georgia. And they had a little bit of a rough season last year. I don't think anybody can really deny that. They kind of went, I would say they went a little bit too big for their britches, right? But new robot, they've done a lot of practice, I've heard, and they're looking to come into, are they going to Gainesville?
I'm trying
Yeah, they're going to Gainesville.
yeah, they'll
They're
be
going
at
to Gainesville.
yep.
You're
So
right on
they
that.
are looking to come into Gainesville, guns a-blazing, literally. Well, no, not literally, but,
I mean, you
Shooting.
watch the video they sent in, and
Yeah.
it's
it's pretty good.
intimidating. I think for some of the shots they're shooting.
And I will say, it is not a simple robot, right? It is not like they took last year and they're like, oh, we're going to simplify a little bit and become a little more competitive. They just went right back to it. They're like, we're going to build another complicated machine, and those shots are like bullets coming out of there. It's pretty good. Kyle, you feeling good?
Yeah, I'm feeling great.
I seriously cannot wait to play with 4188. It's gonna be fun. Like if they show up with this robot and this performance there at Gainesville, it's gonna be fun. As long as we're working as well.
That's gonna be nasty, especially where they're shooting right now, just behind the wheel. Oh,
And that's so the two biggest things in my mind I'm seeing in this video is that they're one of the few pieces of evidence we've seen tonight of functioning autonomous modes, it looks like, for shooting not only the 3 they start with, but going to get additional power cells for shooting an auton. But they also show that shot from behind the color wheel, so they can shorten their cycling time and still be hitting some 2-pointers from long range. So
I wonder how accurate they are from that distance, because one thing we have seen at especially the Israel events is teams aren't making a lot of shots. So I think if you can kind of do it from that far, color wheel, or you can take a couple more seconds to get a little closer, I would definitely get a little closer.
Yep.
But it really depends, and we'll have to see how accurate they are from distance, right? let's see. This does mark a little bit of a return for 4188, right? Because I think about the last season where they were kind of on all cylinders at Gainesville, which was, you guys remember?
I don't.
It wasn't that long ago. It was 2017
Okay.
Steamworks.
Yeah.
Right? Do you guys remember what happened that season for them?
It went to Einstein.
They went to Einstein.
Yeah.
And then Festival Champions.
And Festival Champions. And I think they might have picked up another banner or two along the way.
Probably.
So,
Rocket City?
Rocket City,
Was it Rocket City? I feel like it was Rocket City.
our off, what?
That was in 2016. They went to.
Albany, yes. Albany, and then
There you
Newton
go.
Division, and then finalists on Einstein. So, you know, I think they're definitely back in that sort of old 4188 that we know,
Yeah.
which is going to be fun to watch. I don't necessarily want to be competing against them at Gainesville. But I will say, when it comes to Gainesville, I don't know if being the best robot at the beginning really matters.
No, it's basically, can I move? Can I do the basics? And can I have a schedule that fits me? As well as, can I not trip over myself? That's the big part.
Well, I just think the biggest thing with Gainesville is, and you know what? Not even going to beat around the bush.
Yeah.
So that was 4188, and now we're going to preview Gainesville.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with just a couple of pointers of things that you've seen so far to keep in mind for Gainesville. Anupam, we're going to start with you.
A couple of things in mind, like I've been harping all night. The climbs are going to be key. Depending on how many climbers we have at the event, eliminations could be like, there could be some sort of like, I'm forgetting the term, but death by serpentine, where the first seed may have like they might have the two climbers and two good shooters, but if that third robot, I don't know if there'll be any triple climbs, but if that third robot's not really good enough to like get in there, or like if the 8th seed has 3 climbing robots, that is a huge point difference to overcome, even if you have the best shooters in the game.
Kellen, what do you got?
Somewhat on that same note, just looking at some Israel stats, it looked like for qualification matches, at least, there were 59 qualification matches, so what winds up being 118, I think, total opportunities for either of the ranking points. The power cell related, I forget the exact name for it, but power cell related ranking point never occurred a single time. I don't know if it was even approached closely to any degree.
I mean,
No.
no, they went to the second level, but it was never to the point where.
Exactly, but on the other hand, you then have the other ranking point for climbing and balancing at the end of the match. That only happened 12 times in 59 matches, meaning it happened about 10% of matches, so the 12 out of 118 times is in that ballpark for that 10%. So it looks like in order to play that ranking game, it's all about winning your matches. Whatever you have to do, if it's climbing, if it's shooting, whatever skill set you have, really, really focus on making sure your team comes out of the match with more points, regardless. Obviously, more ranking points are better, but it seems like if you can get that W every single time, maybe lose a match and make up a ranking point somewhere. But being in that 2-point average for that ranking point average should net you a really high ranking in this game, if trends continue from that Israel event.
All right, Kyle, what do you got for us?
So I think the thing that I would have, especially for Gainesville, is just being able to be agile in terms of game strategy. What I think I noticed from Israel is, and this happens with a lot of week ones in general, where they're still trying to find their footing in their game, in their own personal game. But what I realized looking at the Israel events is that for a lot of teams, especially when it's with a shooting game like this, is you can get so focused on basically perfecting your shot, you're going to basically ignore the rest of game flow entirely. At a certain point, I think it's always going to be important, if your shot isn't falling for the 2-pointer, start going for the low goal, because if you have that ability, go ahead and low goal, because like you said, it's going to be about winning the match. And with a lot of the matches that we saw, there are very very wide spans of points that you're dealing with in general. So my big thing would be to stay agile in terms of strategy and to be able to pivot, especially as we know with week ones, everything's going to be up in the air. Murphy's Law will apply here. So be ready. If your shot isn't falling, switch to low goal, switch to defense. Just be the best version of yourself you can be for week one. And just if it doesn't work week one, be ready for your second event in general.
And to pile on that a little bit, you were hitting on a really important topic is play with the robot you have, not the robot you intended to have.
Yes.
Because a lot of teams get in that tunnel vision mindset of this is the robot we designed to build. We were only going to score all the 3-pointers or a lot of 2-pointers. But again, play with the robot you have on hand. If something's in reach, maybe reach for it at the event because you get 12 matches and some practice field time. But yeah, otherwise focus on using the skill set you do have.
I'm actually going to use that point to make my point is that just you've really got to, I would say you've got to scout very carefully at Gainesville, especially for eliminations. Right?
I would agree.
One of the things I think that makes 1746 so dangerous at Gainesville is just because you guys never work until like the last qualification match, right?
We're going to break that trend.
We'll see.
Knock on wood.
Don't break
How
that table.
hard do you have to knock on wood to make it official?
Do you have a hammer?
But I think the real thing is that a lot of teams aren't reaching per se, but they're turning their robots on for the first time. They're driving for the first time. And so a lot of the real powerhouse teams that are going to show up aren't going to get really going until, I'd say, Saturday or even late Saturday, right? Sorry, Sunday. Back in my day. But what you'll have is you have the first seeds at the first event in this district have not done very well, right? And I think it's precisely because of this, because the first seed makes a good pick. And they definitely should, right? They should make the safe pick that gets them to the finals. But then you have a team like 1746 that just all of a sudden in their last qualification match, they figured out how to work, right? 1648, I think a couple seasons ago, they started placing cubes. And I think in their last qualification match, they placed 1. And then they pushed their alliance from quarters into semis, right? So you have a lot of these teams that are going to rise up. Mm-hmm. I would say for the higher seeds, your success depends not on making a safe pick, especially at Gainesville. If you need to, think about making that risky pick, picking that team that's turning that corner. I think that's what's going to help you get to the finals.
Trend lines. Look at who's trending upwards. Look at who's been getting some stuff working.
Yeah. And when you say trend line, my mindset just went to trend line scouting data, right?
Yeah.
I don't think that's what you meant, and that's not how I'm going to take it. I would just say trend line, really talk to teams that are out there, right? Have an idea of what their history is, and just know where they are in the process, right? When 1746 and 1648 won Gainesville, I think about 3 or 4 seasons ago.
Right.
What?
3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, 3 years ago. One of the things that we as 1648 knew was that 1746 was working on their climber, right?
Right.
And we were actually helping you guys with your climber. And so when it came time to pick, I think your climber still wasn't really working, but we actually went ahead and made the pick because we were confident in our own abilities to get you guys working, but we knew, your general working habits. So I think pit scouting and keeping your ear to the ground is going to be very, very important. Mm-hmm. And I think for top seeds, don't be afraid to make that risky pick because I think that's what it's going to take to ultimately go home with a banner.
I think you're right, especially
Kyle. I know I'm right.
Wow. No, especially just because Gainesville in past years has been, I would say, a semi-strong event. There were a lot of powerhouse teams that went to that event. This year does seem to kind of have dwindled just slightly in terms of the notable teams. Obviously, any team can come to these events and really show and become a new person. But in terms of historically strong teams, it is on the lower side this year. But I will also say going back to Newfoundland's point in terms of the death by serpentine, that is so real, especially last year with 1747 winning us the first seed.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really is going to be looking at your pit scouting, kind of figuring out how do I avoid basically screwing myself over towards the later part of the draft.
Okay, so we're going to move on to our last segment, and this is supposed to be like one good team and one team to watch, but we're really pushing on time here, so we're just going to do your one sort of dark horse team to watch coming in from the shadows. You know, who are you guys keeping an eye on? Nupum G.
Okay, I'm gonna go with an out-of-state team, 3196 Orc. So we actually played with them back in Thor and won that event with them, and they seem to have. Last year they had a solid level 3 climb and a decent cargo game, a little bit of hatches here and there, but I see them as they're from North Carolina. I see them as coming out strong. They usually do decently well in week ones. I could see them using no bag time to really step up their game, and I think they will go far in the playoffs, and people won't see it coming because they'll be all caught up in 4188 and hopefully 1746.
All right, that sounds cool. What team was it again?
3196 Pork.
Spoke. Okay.
Pork.
Kellen?
High utility team, so it's Spork. Looking at the team list, there's a handful of choices. A lot of them I don't know anything about.
You get
what
just
their,
one.
Their robot looks like. My
Go.
pick is gonna be. I'm gonna go with Ignite 6829.
That's not really an underdog.
That's not an underdog.
Like a team to
Did
watch.
you say
No.
underdog?
No, we said underdog.
It's a dark horse.
Just like dark horse from the shadows, like
Someone that we
not
wouldn't
as well known.
expect.
Ignite's like they've been Einstein. I think they're on the map, right?
No, so they went to Einstein with a certain skill set. I'm curious
Okay.
where they build from there because they wound up playing a lot of defense. I'm curious where their offense game, if they can kick it to another level.
I'll allow it. Okay. All right, you got Ignite on the board. Kyle?
Ignite on the board. All right, so I would say one team that I think will be interesting to take a look at will be my choice. I'm going to go with Fernbank.
Why are you going with Fernbank, Kyle?
So the reason I'm going with Fernbank is Fernbank historically has been a pretty solid team. Going back from last year, I mean, if you kind of look, they got Chairman's Award both at Forsyth and at the Peachtree District. They were able to stay pretty high up in terms of rankings, in terms of last year, rank 9 and rank 6. But I do think seeing from the state championship where they were down at rank 33, there were a couple things with their robot that I felt were lacking. And so my hope is that this year that they kind of regrouped and so that they'll have a more complete game going throughout this year. That's my big part, especially the fact that they're doing Gainesville and then doing Carrollton. So they have Gainesville to be able to get through that week 1 jitters, and then I think with the people that they have and the personnel that they have, they're going to be very focused for Carrollton. And I believe that they'll even be focused for week 1 too.
All right, that's a pretty good pick. All right, my pick is going to be 6919,
Nice.
the Commodores. Right?
Okay.
First seed last year, right?
Yeah, see, Kellen?
What kind of underdog is that? First seed, yeah.
First seed inconsistent.
Yeah, first seed. But I think because they're from Albany, they don't get as much attention as like 1746, as Walton. But I think when you look at that South Georgia geography, they are sort of the dominant team that's down there. And so I think this is going to be the first year where they're coming into a shooting game. So it'll be interesting to see how they develop, which strategy did they go with? Because I think last year they played a pretty big role in helping a lot of teams go with the every bot strategy. Do they go that route, or do they go a little bit bigger this year? You know, I think there's a lot of questions around them. They're not as big of like a dark horse. I think they're definitely going to do well. I think how well is the real question here. And maybe first seed again, they're going to make, you know, I expect to see them in playoffs. How far they go is really going to be where what I look for. All right. And on that note, I think we're going to end the show. Thank you guys for joining us for our first live stream. Hope you enjoyed the robots. We will make all this content available publicly. So look out for the links on, the mentor Slack for you mentors, and then for Chief Delphi for everybody else. Right? Good to go?
Good to go.
And